Okay.
Okay? If you were in
Yep.
the catering, if you were a caterer, which I have a feeling you could have done a little bit of that too.
We did a little bit of that too.
Okay. All right. So today, gentlemen, we start the new parak, and we're all going to look how to cook. Okay. We're going to cook the Korban Pesach. Okay. And if any of you have ever had a rotisserie, okay, and used a rotisserie, okay, you know that it's not always easy to put the chicken on the spit and keep it there so that the legs or whatever, the wings, they don't fall or whatever. You got to tie it appropriately, okay? So if you think of that example of putting a chicken, or you go into a Grove, or you go into Aroma and you buy rotisserie chicken and you see it on the spit, okay? We can identify what we're going to be learning about today from that perspective a little bit easier, I think. But we'll do our sponsors first, and then we'll go right into the Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara. Dr. Paul Konigsberg, A Year of Learning in Memory of his brother. Dr. Sam Konigsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Rav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avramea ben Shimon, Cheryl Schur, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Fetterbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Fetterbush, Oriel ben Harav Shimon, friends of Joe Wolf, in memory of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Yisrael. A month of learning by Adina and Michael Kirshner, Michael Kirshner, in memory of their parents, Florence and Nathan Kirshner, and friend Harriet Friedman. Tova and Leo Zimmer, in memory of her mother, Henya bas Rab Beryl, and her father, Aaron ben Yosef Mordechai. Perry and Jill Meltzer, in memory of his mother, Malka bas Baruch, and sister Goldalea bas David Halevi. Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her father, Yoshua Shia ben Moshe Yehuda HaKohen. Stanley Presser, in memory of his mother, Leah bas Yehuda, his mother-in-law, Golda bas Avram, Ruchel Mincha bas Moshe. Ruth Burian, Judy and Edward Boyne, in memory of Ruth and Judy's mother, Hadassah bas Azriel Zelig Miriam, and Father Yitzchak ben Yosef for Esther. A week of learning by Ann and David Klar, in memory of her mother, Gidel bas Yaakov. Also a week of learning by Sam and Ramona Levine and Charlie Gelfenstein, in memory of Sam's mother and Charlie's mother-in-law, Livsha bas Avram Shammai, and Sam's father and Charlie's father-in-law, Yechiel Michel ben Arav Alexander Ziskin. Today is the 3rd, and we have a Day of Learning Plus Torah Fund, sponsored by Gary and Toby Greenstein, in memory of his mother, Henya Rachel bas Shlomo. And the Shamas have an Aliyah, Kranka Rafia, Velti Yashir Shema Tliya, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtiar. Okay. Ayin Dalid, Amud Aleph, top of the Amud. Ketzad Solin et HaPesach. How do we roast the Korban Pesach. Right? So remember, we came to the conclusion that the people would come to Yerushalayim, they would bring the animal that they had selected a couple of days before, bring it usually in the afternoon of the 14th. The animal would be slaughtered in the temple precinct, the Azara. The appropriate Evarim would be taken, appropriate dam, okay? Then they would bring the animal home, right? We came to that conclusion, and they would be expected to roast it themselves, okay? Now, I said if we identify with the idea of rotisserie or doing it, buying rotis chicken, for example, at Grove or Aroma, whatever, okay? We remember that it was put on a spit, okay? And the spit would rotate, and in doing so, the heat would then affect the animal. However, I want to point this out as we go into the Mishnah and then Gemara. That heat would affect the spit, which was usually a metal spit, okay? And that would, therefore, that might mean, okay, I don't see Marvin this morning. That might mean that the heat from the spit would also impact on the cooking, perhaps the inside of the rotis chicken as it went around, okay? So that's going to be one of the issues that we have to deal with. What kind of spit is acceptable? Why? What kind of spit is not acceptable? Does the animal get only cooked from the outside? Or what happens if it's cooked from the inside? Okay. So using all that as a bit of an introduction to the Mishnah, we see the following, right? Ketzad solin et Pesach. How is it that we roast the Korban Pesach? Says our Mishnah, Mevi'in shipud shel rimon. Okay, we bring a wooden spit used from primarily pomegranate. Okay, v'tochvo letoch piv, and we put the piece of wood spit, okay, through the mouth, ad beit nikuvato, and it comes out through the anus. V'notein et kra'av, and we put the legs, ve'et b'nei me'av letocho, and we put the legs and the entrails of the animal inside, says the Mishnah. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Haglili. This is the view of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Rabbi Akiva, however, is going to disagree and say as follows. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Kimin Bishul Huzeh, challenges Rabbi Yossi that is a kind of cooking. In other words, when we take meat and we stuff it with something inside, that is more like cooking rather than sli. But he says, Rabbi Akiva, elatolin chutzalo, namely, he says, we take the legs or the entrails and hang them on the spit next to the body, so to speak, of the animal. Right? That's what his view is. Second part of the Mishnah. Ein solin et Pesach lo al hashipud. We do not roast the Korban Pesach on what I'm going to call a metal spit, v'lo al ha'askala, and not on a metal grill. Koren actually has a picture of the kind of grill that was may have been used. Okay, it was basically a stand, a metal stand that stood over a fire pit. Okay. Amar Rabbi Tzadok, says Rabbi Tzadok, Ma'aseh Rabban Gamliel. But Rabbi Tzadok says, hold on a second. There was an incident with Rabban Gamliel, She'amar Latavi Avdo, who said to Tabi, his servant, Say utzle lanu et Pesach al ha'askala. Go and roast the Pesach over a metal grill. So this Maaseh, this story, according to Rabbi Tzadok, seems to challenge this later part of our Mishnah. So we will get to that eventually. However, the first part of our Gemara wants to deal with the Resha, the first definition of what kind of spit to be used. Why do we need, says we're going to see, it to be a wooden spit, and why specifically from pomegranate as opposed to some other kind of wood? So the Gemara tells us, Veniti shoma techet. So bring a spit of wood. Let's use a spit of metal. Gemara answers, Ide decham mikzato, cham kulo. Since the metal spit, at least part of it gets warm, the entire metal spit is going to get hot, right? V'kam tuye, and therefore it's going to roast michamat hashipud. That part of the animal is going to get roasted from the heat of the spit rather than from the fire. V'rachmana amar, whereas the Torah says, tzli eish, v'lo tzli mechamat davar acher, that it must be roasted by fire and not roasted in any other means. Okay, says the Gemara, let's raise the following question then. What about other kinds of wood? V'naite shel dekel. Let's use wood from a palm tree. The Gemara answers, Ide de'it le shive. Since that wood has grooves, okay, mafik maya. The grooves might hold water, and therefore water will come out. V'have kimevushal, and therefore it would be again like cooking. Gemara tries again. How about a different kind of wood? V'naite shel te'ena. Let's use wood from a te'ena, from a fig tree, right? Olive tree, things like that. Gemara answers, Ide de mechalchel. That wood is hollow. Mafik maya. Water might have been in there and will come out. V'havale kimevushal. And again, that would be like cooking. Another attempt. V'naite shel alon. Or let's use wood from an oak tree. Shel charuv. Or wood from a carob tree. V'shel shikma. Or wood from a sycamore tree. Again, the Gemara has an answer. Ide de'it be kitre. Since those kinds of woods where they're cut off, in other words, to make a smooth enough spit, it's going to leave knots on the mafik maya. It could be then that water is going to come out of those knots. Okay? And so therefore the Gemara raises the question, Shel rimon nami it be kitre. But wood from a pomegranate tree also is going to have knots. Shie kitre. But since, answers the Gemara, the knots on the rimon, on a pomegranate tree, are smooth. Okay, so no water would come out. Ve'ibayat ema, and if you want, we would say as follows: Benivga bar shita delete be kitre. That ideally you would use a branch less than 1 year old, which would not have any knots in it. So the Gemara asks, Vaha ika be piske. Okay, but don't we say here, okay, that it has, right, some notches, some breaks in it, so to speak. The mapik lebe piske lebar. Okay, so the answer the Gemara here again gives, okay, is that when you cut it off, okay, at the end, right, you make sure that that part of the branch is sticking on the outside of the animal, okay, and is not in the inside of the animal. Now, matne la delo Rabbi Yehuda. Now our Gemara tells us it must be that this Mishnah is not taught in the authorship of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, because we have a Braita that says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Keshem sheshipud shel eitz eino nisraf, the same way that a wooden spit does not get burnt up, kach shipud shel matechet eino martiach. So likewise, the metal spit does not become hot. In other words, it does not reach a heat that it's going to transfer. Okay? Amrulo, but the sages said to him, Zeh cham miktzato, cham kulo, that when the metal spit gets hot, the entire spit is hot. V'zeh cham miktzato, eino cham kulo. And a wooden spit, if part of it gets hot, it doesn't mean that the entire spit is hot. Okay, now that we've clarified that aspect of the Mishnah, we go on to how we actually handle, so to speak, the next section of the Mishnah, which was the source of the machloket between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva. Okay? Said the Mishnah, V'notenet kra'av v'chulei. Right? Tanya. The Braita says as follows. Okay? Rabbi Yishmael korehu. Okay? That Rabbi Yishmael would say as follows. In other words, he would call this, he had a nickname for this kind of cooking, toch toch, inside, inside. Okay? In other words, you stuff the legs and the entrails inside the animal. Okay? Rabbi Tarfon korehu gedi mekulas. And Rabbi Tarfon had a nickname for the kind of cooking. Okay, and he called it a helmeted animal, helmeted gedi. Okay, in other words, if the item, if this is the spit, and you have the animal part, and you put the other part over here, okay, the entrails and the legs, it's like this is on top of the animal, and therefore it's like the animal has a helmet on it. So that would seem to imply that Rabbi Yishmael held like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and Rabbi Tarfon held like Rabbi Akiva. Tana Rabbanan, however, a Braita teaches, Ezehu Gedim Mikulas, Da'asur le'echol b'leil Pesach b'zman hazeh. What do we mean when we say that this kind of helmeted animal is forbidden to be eaten on as the Korban Pesach, or in the evenings of Pesach nowadays? In other words, after the time of the Beis HaMikdash, Kol shetzla'o kulo ke'echad, where one has roasted the entire animal at one time. Nechtoch mimenu ever, if we cut off a particular limb of the animal. Nishalek mimenu ever, or if we were to boil a particular limb of the animal. Ein ze gedi mikulas, then this is no longer considered this kind of helmeted gedi. Hashta, now, yesh lomar nachtoch mimenu ever. So let's say that nowadays you simply cut off a limb of the animal. The afal gav the ka matvele bahade, that even though we might bring it this way, amart lo, you'll say no, nishalek mibai. So why then do we even have to raise the question of cooking part of the animal separately, boiling it separately? Amar Rav Sheshet, sheshalku b'mechubar. Okay, because we're concerned that the person might boil the animal while that limb is still attached to the whole animal. And that would imply that that's almost close to tzli, like it was done in Korban Pesach. Now, Amar Rava. Rava says the following, and Rabba's view, is this. Hai muliata, this stuffing, sharia, is permitted. Okay? So he would seem to go along with the view of Rabbi Yossi, that you put the legs and the entrails inside the animal. Amar le Abai. And so Abai responds, Vaha ka below dama. But what about the fact then that doesn't allow any blood from those limbs, the legs and the entrails, to exit? Amarle, and his answer to him is important for us. Kibol'a kach polta, that the same way that the fire, the heat, is going to absorb, so it's going to exude. In other words, the heat draws out, okay, and also brings in. And this phrase becomes very important then in a lot of kashrut issues. Okay? And so as the Gemara continues, okay, we see as follows. It's going to discuss aspects of this phrase and more aspects of cooking meat, okay, as well. Okay. So the Gemara asks, Nema Messiah, can't we say that this supports him? Namely, does this support the view of Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Notain et kra'av et b'nei me'av letocho, that one puts the legs and the intestines, the entrails, inside. Ma'itama, what's the reasoning? Lav mishum da amrinen kibol'o kach polto. Is it not because we can then apply the principle of absorption is like exuding? Amre, we would say, however, shani hata, rather it's different there. Kevan de'ika be hashchita de mechalkeu. Right? Why? Because de'ika beit hashchita, because we have the place where the animal was slaughtered. Okay? The incision where the blood came out, that area is now hollow. And so any blood that would be found coming out of the legs or the intestines, okay, as the animal is being roasted, there is a place for that blood to leave. Okay. So what happens? As the Gemara then tells us, and we turn to the next Amud, Midei Daive, that blood is going to flow out. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Nema Messiah. Okay. Perhaps we'll say then that this does support the view of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. However, the Gemara continues. And as we proceed on Amud Beis, we're going to see a number of other aspects that do deal with variety themes connected with kashrus. Okay? And it says as follows: Halev kor'o umotzi et damo. That if they're cooking the heart of the animal, excuse me, it must be cut. Okay. By the way, that must be done in a certain manner. Okay, sheti va'aref, in different directions. Okay, vertically and horizontally. Okay, so that the blood can exude out. Lo kor'o, if it's not cut, kor'o le'achar bishulo umutar. Okay, then it can be heated, right? Cooked, and then afterwards cut, and then it would be permitted. My tama, what's the reasoning? Lav mishum da amrinan kibol o kach polto. Is it not because, again, we can use the principle of the way it's absorbed so it exudes? Shani lev deshaya. No, it's different because the heart is smooth. Aini, is that really the case? Asks the Gemara. Vaha Ravin Saba. But here we have a case. What about the following? Where the Rabin the elder, Tafle Hahi Bar Guzla the Rav, that he wrapped up a young bird, a young pigeon, let's say, he wrapped it up in dough and he served it to Rav. Va'amarle, and Rav said to him, Ima'ale tafle, if it's well wrapped, okay, in dough, havli ve'ichol, give me a portion and I'll eat. Okay? Now, Mepharshim have a problem with this particular story. One explanation is that what he was eating was only the dough, okay, and not necessarily the meat that was inside of it. Okay. Another explanation suggests that perhaps we are dealing with this question of bol o kach polto, okay, as a proof. Okay. But the Gemara continues and tells us the particular dough that was used, hahi bismida, okay, that was, okay, very fine flour, demafrid, okay, or demafrir, and that flour is crumbly, okay, it's crumbly, so in other words, it doesn't stay perhaps as easily attached to the animal, to the bird, and therefore blood could still flow out of it. So we would reject the use of kibol o kach polto in regards to this story. So now we have another story. Vaha Rava ikle be reish galuta. But what about the story? He says the Gemara, of Rava, who was the student of Rabbah, okay? And we would assume that he would follow his teacher's practices. And he came to the house of the Reish Galuta. V'taflu le bar avuz avaza. And they wrapped in dough, okay, a young duck, some duck meat. Amar ilo de chazite, de zig kizuza chivara. Had I not seen, says Rava, that the flour was as white as a white coin, okay? In other words, freshly minted coin, so to speak. Lo achle mine, I wouldn't have eaten from it. So the Gemara again raises the point. Ve'isalka da'atach. And if you're going to think that we would apply the principle kibo'o kachpolto, my area kizig. So what then do we say that this coin has to be white, okay? That it has to be so clear. Afilu kilo zignami. If we use that principle, even if it's the flour is not, right, clear, right, not so white. So the Gemara answers, Hatam b'chivarta desharir. Okay, there again, okay, we're talking about the fact that the flour is white because it's firm, right? Vehilchata, and the law is as follows. Dismida, when we're using fine flour, bain asmik, whether it turns red, bain lo asmik, or if it doesn't turn red, sharia, the food is permitted. Why? Because we said that was crumbly, and there was a way for the blood to exit. The chivarta, okay, but if we're saying that it's right, that it's not such fine flour, okay, it's a little bit more coarse flour. Izig kizuza chivara, if it's white like a coin, sharia, it's permitted. Elo, if not asir, then it's forbidden. Then the Gemara tells us, the shar kmachim, that in regards to any other kinds of flour, asmik asur, if it becomes red, it's forbidden. V'lo lo asmik, if it doesn't become red, shari, then it's permitted. Okay. So we now get to another aspect of the cooking. Remember, we said that Rabbi Yossi's view was that you stuffed the Paschal lamb. Okay. So the Gemara says, Hai muliata, this meat stuffing. Okay. Man da asar. Okay. Who is it that forbids it? Namely Abaye. Afilu puma latachat. Okay. That seems to be the case even where there's an opening below, okay, in the animal, okay, where blood could exit there. Uman deshare, and the one who permits it, apparently that's Rava, right? Afilu puma la'ayo. That seems to be the case even if the opening of the animal is up top. Vehilchata, and the law is muliata share, that stuffing of the animal is permitted. Afilu puma la'ayo, even where the opening is on top. Now, let's take another example, says the Gemara, in a slightly different topic. Okay, we're still dealing with meat and still dealing with the concern about the exuding of the blood, right? Umsa, okay, umsa is raw meat. Beye, okay, testicles. Mizrake, and the thick veins of an animal. Okay, plige ba Rav Acha v'Ravina. There was an argument between Rav Acha and Ravina in terms of how to deal with the cooking of these items. B'chol haTorah kula, Rav Acha lechumra, throughout the entire Torah, for the most part, says our Gemara, Rav Acha took a more stringent approach, v'Ravina lekula, and Ravina tended to take a more lenient approach. V'hilchata keravina lekula, and the law is generally according to Ravina for the leniencies. Lavar mehani tlat, with the exception of these three. Rav Acha lekula, because in these three examples, Rav Acha is the one who's more lenient, Ravina lechumra, and Ravina is the one who is more stringent. V'hilchata kirav acha lakula. And the law in these three examples is according to Rav Acha for the leniency. So now the Gemara is going to give us a little bit more detail in terms of these specific items. Right? Hai unsa da asmik. Let's say you have raw meat that's red. Chatche, and cut it. Umalche, and salt it. Afilu l'kdeira shari. Then even to cook it in a pot is permitted. Okay, so it's what we think of as our, I'm going to call for the moment, one of the recognized methods of cutting the meat and salting it. Of course, we have to wash afterwards, but in any case, right, we'll go on in a moment and see what the other alternative is. Shafte b'shipuda, shari, okay? Or you could take this meat, put it onto a spit, roast it as another way of exuding the blood, and that's also permitted. So we have those two, what I'll call for the moment, classical examples of how to remove the blood from the meat. Now, midev deyev, says the Gemara, because in these cases, the blood flows out. However, the Gemara tells us, achte agomre, if we place the meat simply on coals, plige ba Rav Acha v'Ravina. There's an argument between Rav Acha and Ravina. Chad asar v'chad shari. One forbids and one permits. Man da asar, the one who forbids, what's his reasoning? Matz meat tsamit. He's saying that happens is the meat sort of shrivels up, and as a result, it begins to harden, which results in the keeping the blood within the meat itself. Uman deshare, and the one who permits it, right? What happens? Mishav sha'iv, okay? That the blood is drawn out. Vehilchata, and the law is mishav sha'iv, that the blood is drawn out. So Gemara continues, what about, that answers fine, was fine for the raw meat. What about the issue of the testicles? Okay. V'chein be'e, and likewise in regards to those. Chat chinhu, you cut them. Umal chinhu, excuse me, and you salt them. Afilu l'kadeira sharian, then even to be put into a pot is permitted. Talinhu b'shipuda, if you hang them on a spit to roast them, sharian, that's also permitted. Midev dayev, what? Because the blood flows out. Achtinhu agumre, but if I put the bayim on the coals, plige be Rav Acha v'Ravina. Again, there's the machloket of Rav Acha and Ravina. Chad asar v'chad shari, one forbids and one permits. Man da asar, according to the one who forbids. Matz meat tsamit, again, because in this case, the bayim shrink, excuse me, shrivel up, harden, retain the blood. Uman deshare, and the one who permits argues that the blood is drawn out. V'chein mizrike, and likewise those large veins. Okay, Chatche, you slice them, cut them. Umalche, and you salt them. Afilu l'kdei rashari, even to put in a pot to be cooked is permitted. Talye b'shipuda, if you hang them again on a spit, right? Beit hashchita latate, so long as the opening where the animal was slaughtered, okay, is downwards. Share, it's permitted. Midev da'iv, because the blood flows out. Achte agomre, if you place it directly on the coals, plige Rav Acha v'Ravina. Again, we have the argument of Rav Acha and Ravina. Chad asar v'chad share, one forbids, one permits. Man da asar matzmit samit, the one who forbids, again argues that the meat shrivels up, hardens, and retains the blood. Man da share mishav sha'iv, and the one who permits argues that the blood is drawn out. Okay? V'hilchata mishav sha'iv. And the law is that the blood is drawn out. Now, slightly different example, but still with the same topic. Okay, I'll put it that way. We're now taking a piece of raw meat and we're dipping it into a solution, let's say a vinegar. The vinegar is going to, shrink or shrivel, tighten the meat. Okay? So the Gemara says now, with this example, Hai umsa da asmik chalya. What about raw meat? Okay, that we say is red, okay, and it's put in, and its vinegar is red. Okay, in other words, we put the vinegar in the meat in the vinegar, okay, and the vinegar turns red, okay. Do we say that meat is not acceptable? Asir, it's forbidden. Lo asmik chalya, if the vinegar does not turn red, shari, it's permitted. Ravina Amar, according to Ravina, afilu lo asmik nami chalye, even if it doesn't turn red, okay, that vinegar, asir, is also prohibited. Efshar delete ba shorke dama. Why? Because it's impossible for there not to be at least some streaks of blood there in that vinegar. Now, Amar le Mar, Bar Amemar. So, however, Mar Bar, the son of Amemar, says to Rav Ashi, Abba, in other words, my father, Amemar, Magma le Gamue. He used to swallow that liquid, okay? Ikada Amre, and there are those that even say, Rav Ashi Gufe, Magma le Gamue, that Rav Ashi himself would even swallow that liquid. Amar le Mar Bar Amemar the Rav Ashi. Okay? And then again he says another example. Abba, my father, Amemar, Vahai Chala, the Khalid Be Chada Zimna. Okay? That one time, if my father would soak the meat and the vinegar would turn red, right? One time. Two, Lo Ta'ane Khalid Be. Further, he would no longer soak items in that same vinegar. So the Gemara asks, Mai Shna Mechalya Mitamha Dechalatinan Be? Okay, what is so unique or different about such weak vinegar, okay, that we don't continue to use it, to soak with it. Hatam atya lakiyuta. Okay. The pere be'ene, going over just a little bit to the next Amud. In that case, he said, the sharpness of the fruit is still like it was originally. Okay. If it's a fresh vinegar. Okay. Hacha, here in this case, lete likiyuta, the pere be'ene. Okay, we're saying that case, the sharpness of the vinegar, okay, is no longer possible, okay, after it's been used, and therefore that's why we would say in that case it's not permitted. Okay, and we're going to stop there. Okay, and tomorrow we'll pick up with this question of the use of the prohibition or the use of the grill, for example. Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Be well.
Everybody take care. Stay well.
Take care, stay safe.